Today on Design, Build, and Fix, we're going to show you how to take those countertop templates you made the other day and actually place them on your granite slab to maximize the use of your granite. The next thing we're going to do is to deal with the flow of your granite and how to keep that intact. The next thing, we're going to show you actually how to cut those granite pieces out so you can make that beautiful countertop and save thousands of dollars doing so because you fabricated it yourself. And remember, if you like the content, help me out and subscribe to the channel. All right, so let's go cut some granite. So whenever you do a project, you have to know how much material you're going to need. It's very important that you do this calculation ahead of time. The last thing you want when you do a granite countertop is to have to go back and grab another slab of granite. As you know, that's a huge undertaking. So some people will actually do it by taking their templates and kind of guessing. I prefer to actually do a drawing for it. So let me show you how we do that. All right, so now that you have your templates all made and you've picked your slab of granite and you actually measure the granite, you're going to want to go back and actually try and figure out how these templates are going to fit on that slab of granite. Now, the rule of thumb is if you have a square footage of your template, which is going to be about 3/4 of the area or the square footage of a slab, it should fit onto one slab. If it's more than that, it may have to go onto two different slabs. But for this one here, it's actually going to fit onto one slab. Now, I normally, after I've grabbed the dimensions of the slab, draw it in AutoCAD, and it allows me to draw each one of my templates, which what these things are, and place it on the slab to find out how it's going to be orientated. And I now realize that the long run of this will fit here. The corner, which is going to run onto this end, can be cut out of here, and then I can put this one here and this one here. This one's next to the stove and this one's next to the refrigerator. Now this area here, I kind of try to make the countertops as efficient as I can to leave this slab left over as a remnant. Now the only thing you have to deal with at this point in time, knowing that they're all going to fit on one slab, is if I cut this corner out of here and I put it over here, is that going to screw up the flow of the granite? Now basically I chose to do it this way, and I did it on purpose to show you what it looks like if you mess up the flow of the granite and if you actually do the flow of the granite and do it well. And I'll show you what that's going to be here in a little bit later in this video. But we know it's all going to fit on one slab, so let me show you the next thing about the flow of the granite and how it's going to work out. All right, so here's what I mean when we talk about the flow of the granite. Now, this is the long slab as it runs left and right. And as you can see, for the veining or the flow of the granite, it generally flows in this direction. And as you take a look at this other piece of the granite that was cut out, you'll notice that the general flow is in this direction, from the upper right to the lower left. And this is technically incorrect when you're fabricating granite. You want this veining or flow to continue in that same process. Now, in order for this to have been successful, technically this shorter run here should have been over here, and then the curve over here, and then we could have rotated it in order to make that flow continue in the same direction. But I cut this on purpose just to give you that example. And you really want to make sure that you make your flow and have it consistent, because if you don't, the first thing most people are going to notice is that it changes direction, and they're going to know it's not been made by a fabricator. All right, so here's what it looks like if you have the flow of your granite at your seams working like it's supposed to. If you take a look, the general flow is from the lower right to the lower right to the upper left, and as you keep going, you'll see that the veining or the flow keeps going that direction from lower right to upper left. Now if you really look close, you can see that the seam is right there, and it's going to run all the way back. Now one of the things that you're going to want to do is, once you've created your flow correctly and you've seamed this together, you're going to want to go through with a permanent black marker. And I put dots in here on the seam to kind of match this with this to give it a little bit more cosmetic look. Now, if I was doing this over again, this area right here, I would put some black dots here to help disguise this area a little bit. But technically, this is the way it's supposed to look when you have flow done correctly. All right, so now that we've put our straight edge that you can see here in the video been connected, and what I'm doing is running my finger down the edge to make sure if there's any imperfections and see how far I actually have to move the saw in order to get a perfectly straight edge that has no imperfections on it. All right, so now that I know how far away from the edge I have to be, and I know the distance from my cutter to the edge of my saw is, I now place my straight edge on there and get it to the exact size that it needs to be. All right, so now that the straight edge has been positioned where it's supposed to be, you'll notice on there that I've placed some backer boards, and those backer boards, the purpose is to get that straight edge to stay perfectly straight with the pressure that you can apply against the saw against that straight edge in order for that to go perfectly straight. And as you can see, I'm clamping down the straight edge. So if you're a professional fabricator, you have a saw that's called a bridge saw, and that saw actually rides above the granite. I do not have one, and so what I have a tendency to do is to put a couple rows of packing tape on top of the granite, which helps protect the granite from whatever may possibly scratch it from when it's being cut, because my saw actually rides on top of the granite. Now, I could buy a track saw that doesn't actually ride on the granite, it rides on the track itself, but I haven't spent the $800-900 for a really good one in order for that to work. So at this point, I spent a few dollars and grabbed some packing tape and put it on to make this a success. So at this point in time, I'm putting on a garbage bag over my shorts, because if you're using a saw that has water, it's going to get everywhere and your shorts and pants are going to get wet. And so I haven't bought an apron yet, so this is the solution that I came up with. So now that we're all set up to get this thing cut, one of the things you're definitely going to want to make sure that you do is to wear a good pair of safety glasses and some hearing protection, because this tends to be loud. One of the things I can share with you is to make sure that you just do this slow. Slow and steady finishes the race, that you're not trying to win one. And one of the things you want to make sure that you pay attention to as you push it through, if you go too fast, the saw has a tendency to lift up on one side, and it'll give you an angle on your side, which you don't want. So just make sure that it stays flat against the granite while you're cutting it. One thing to always keep in mind is when you're cutting and you finish the cut, do not try and pound on the granite to get it to break off. Just let it break off by itself. And one of the things that I always do is just make sure that the granite is supported. So I let the saw finish the cut as opposed to letting it break off. All right, so now that you've finished your cut, you're going to want to make sure you take all the straight edge stuff off and make sure you pull all of that plastic off to clean that slab up. And then you're going to want to make sure that you hit it with a hose, because that's going to take all that granite residue off to protect your countertop from scratching. Now that you have one side straight, you're going to want to make sure you square the other side to that straight edge. And again, it's just the same process we did before. Use your straight edge. However, at this point, I'm using a carpenter's square in order to get that side that we're trying to cut squared to the other side. So now that we have two sides square to each other, we're going to take our template, and I know that the long template is going to go on this straight edge in the back, and we're going to place this into place. Now, that template that we created is going to have some ins and outs to it. So all we're trying to do is to get it so it's to the point where we have to cut the least amount of the stuff off. All right, so now that you've placed your template on there, you're going to want to actually mark where you're actually going to cut. And the tool that I use for that, as you can see it on the screen, it writes on granite very, very easily. And so basically I'm going to mark on both ends, measure from those marks, put the saw in the right spot, and then actually cut this the whole length. Now this is the long part of the countertop, and so all I'm going to do is cut it all the way off, and we'll deal with the return and which end is going to be the seam a little bit later. All right, so now what we want to do is to place our other templates on our granite slab, to position them roughly where they're going to be, and make sure you do a square cut that's going to allow us to get all three of those parts on there. It's the same process we just did. Make sure you line up everything and put your plastic down, cut it, and go forward from there. So now that you've positioned your other parts on your granite slab, you're going to want to cut those out individually. Now this one here and all the other ones, one of those dimensions is going to be exact. The width is going to be exact. The depth of that countertop slab, it has to be fixed a little bit later. And that's going to be true for all the ones you're going to do here from here on out. So now I have to cut this long section. You can see the template that we have there laid out. And the way I laid it out on the granite, this is the corner piece of it. And we're not so worried about this edge of it because there's going to be a seam there. The other piece right there is the long piece, which actually goes over here. So we're going to worry about this seam a little bit later. But the important thing that we have to do is actually get this corner cut. And so as you can see, I already got them marked out. And in order to do that, anytime you have an inside corner like this, you're definitely going to have to use a 3-inch diameter hole saw to round that corner. So I know I have to get it to that edge and get that circle to fall in there. I'm going to cut that first. After I've cut that, then I'm going to create my set up my straight edge to go to the inside edge of here and to line up with that. Same thing over here, and this corner will be out. And then I'll show you how to finish that up as far as sanding it and grinding it to make that perfect. All right, so the tool that I'm using is a variable speed angle grinder that has my 3-inch diameter diamond tip hole saw in it. And I do not have the angle grinder that actually is water fed, so therefore you see the hose that lays on the countertop. Probably not the best because these are designed to cut wet and dry, but the diamond tips actually work and last longer if you have water. And right now the water is just going across it, so it actually works and works pretty good because I've done about 5 kitchens on this one, and it's still pretty good. And so what we want to do is to drill a hole all the way through. Now normally to get this started, I line one edge of the drill up to the one edge and get that started as long as it's close on the opposite side, and I usually do it at an angle. And then once I get a groove in there, then I kind of make it flat and let it run all the way through. All right, so now that the hole's been cut all the way through, I put my straight edge on and I just do cut in until I hit the hole, and I do the same exact thing for the opposite side, and that corner has been fully or roughly cut out. So now that we have the corner cut out, and our circle in our corner cut out, you see that there? We have some cleanup to do. Right here, we have a little bit of an edge and a little bit of a lip. All right, so we got to clean that up, and a little bit on this side. There's a little bit there. And to clean that up, we're basically going to use our angle grinder that has a curved cutter to it. All right, so the angle that I chose for the camera probably wasn't the best. Didn't realize it until after the fact. But basically all I'm doing is diving that angle grinder in with the curved cutter on it just to shape that corner out. And it's just doing it by freehand. Slow and steady finishes the race. Make sure it's nice and smooth and has a nice curve to it. All right, so here's what it looks like after it's all been grinded. That looks like that is an edge. It's really not. It's just a dark spot on the granite. It's relatively smooth. Nothing more than a 50 grit sandpaper could clean that corner up very nicely. All right, so now that all the pieces have been cut out, it's time to take that extra part of the slab that's not going to be used, otherwise known as the remnant, to get that back into the storage spot to be used for something else. And so as you can see, I'm lifting that up with the engine lift. I'm just going to roll it off to where it's going to be stored. All right, so that's how you cut granite. And the next video coming up, we're going to show you how to polish and edge the edges. Thanks for watching another granite fabrication video. We have a few videos in this series, and if you didn't watch them all, make sure you click the link at the end of the video so you can catch up on all of them. Remember, if you like the content, help me out and make sure you subscribe to the channel. All right, we'll see you on the next one.